Welcome to First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, the birthplace of congregational humanism. We carry on that tradition of free thought today, dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. Our web address is firstunitarian.org. Thank you for joining us.
Have any of you dived into an exploration of your ancestry? Yeah. Or maybe you've had your DNA tested in order to understand more about where you come from? Oh, well, some of this work has been done by my parents' generation. I'm kind of imagining that when my retirement comes, I'm going to spend some time searching more deeply into my ancestral roots. I actually did get some DNA results recently that were both fascinating and surprising, in that they belied the story my family has been telling for decades, maybe generations. So I feel the need to explore what that means about who I am. Now, fortunately, many people have delved into and recorded the ancestry of modern-day Unitarian Universalism. Consequently, not unlike a well-embellished family tree, one can follow all kinds of routes and paths down to back in time to discover both common roots and key turning points. And one of those key turning points happened in the early 1600s, 900 years ago. Those are some deep roots, and they hold important truths about who we are. I mean, what the heck was happening then? Well, in the decades previous, a group of Puritans within the powerful Church of England began to express separationist views, feeling that the church had become too corrupt for any hope of reform. They believed that centralized power could not serve the welfare of people. Sound familiar? Well, these folks are our ancestors. These are the people who eventually fled England and who settled Massachusetts beginning in 1620. And a critical piece of this story, though not my topic for today, is that this land was not terra nullius. These people were displacing the Wampanoag, Pequot, Narragansett, and Mohegan tribes that lived in that area. But because they believed they had a superior style of living and religion, they gave little thought to accommodating those first peoples. And we should not tell our history without acknowledging this. Now, generally, the colonists who settled a particular town had come basically from the same place in England and knew one another. But by contrast, the settlers of a town called Dedham came from different places and were unacquainted. They needed to build some common understandings. Reverend Rene Rakowski tells the story of Dedham this way. Well, the people got there, the first thing they did was to divide the land and decide whose cows were going to go where and that sort of thing. And because in those days the church and the town were really all one thing, they asked, how are we going to be together as a church community? And what they did was to schedule meetings every week for a year to discuss how they were going to be together. And each week the host would begin and speak only to the agreed upon question for the evening. And then everyone would take turns speaking. And if they wanted to share any objections or doubts concerning what someone else had said, they were to do so humbly and with a teachable heart, not with a mind of quibbling or contradicting. In other words, they weren't supposed to speak their own they were supposed to speak their own understandings or doubts, but not to argue or nitpick. Now, it's probably important to note that they didn't talk about dogma or creed. They talked about how they were going to be in community together. In that process, they decided that their highest value together was love. And you might be familiar with the covenant they created in 1637. It began with, "Love is the doctrine of this church, and service is its law." So we can directly trace our covenantal faith to the people of Dedham. At the same time, they were, of course, also planting many seeds for the emerging democracy. Now, the path from Dedham to Unitarian Universalism is long and winding, but still, because of them, what do you believe is the wrong question. It's not what we believe, but rather how we choose to be in relationship with one another, with other beings, with our planet. We are about values and relationships, not about beliefs. Being in covenant with one another is the core of Unitarian Universalism. It's captured beautifully in the words of Emma Merchant that Sandy read just a few moments ago. We make the choice to stay stuck together even when we don't want to be in the same room. But we always come back to the table because we choose to be together. Through thick and through thin, we have chosen love. We make the choice to listen to each other. We make the choice to pick each other up. And we make the choice to love one another. So if there's anything you commonly believe, it is in the practice of covenant, a practice of choosing to be in compassionate relationship with one another, in service of things that matter to us, with a willingness to be changed by our interactions. Now, another way to look at this is that because being non-creedal means that we don't have a kind of glue of common beliefs that unite us, our bond is found in our voluntary choice to be in relationship. Our strength is found by being in covenant. We would be identified not by beliefs, but by how we choose to live. And yet, we are not all that great at talking about or understanding or even living into what it means to be in covenant. And so this morning, I'm concerned with what it means to live in covenant. I invite you to walk into covenant with me as if you were walking into a beautiful garden, a place where together we begin to understand the lived, modern day, right here and now practice of covenant. A place where, especially in times of distress or conflict or transition, we can lean into one another. Of course, it's your choice. Entering the garden is optional. But it's a beautiful place. Being together in this garden, we learn to better trust one another because we have shared expectations around the behaviors we want to cultivate in ourselves and in each other. And in this garden, we have space to breathe. The more we practice covenant, the closer we come to MLK's vision of a community based in love and justice and equity, where hate and fear are overcome by understanding and compassion. It is our covenant, and maybe more so our vision of the possibility it holds, that calls us back to the table again and again. But first we have to understand what covenant is. A covenant is an expression, in the words of Margaret O'Neill, of the promises and commitments we make to be true to ourselves and to others, to live into our highest ideals, to create communities in which our children may thrive and our elders may share the gift of their wisdom, communities from which we may go forth to create a more just and compassionate world. I know that's grand, perhaps too grand to grasp, but it's true. Covenant is a prophetic way to reimagine and re-engage what it is that actually holds us together. We're called into covenant. It's an impulse, a felt response. We might not ever be able to agree on the shape or the existence of whatever it is that calls us. But still, covenant is a sacred impulse toward all our dreams of that beloved community of justice and compassion. Now, covenant is both a noun and a verb. As a noun, it's a stated commitment or even a framed document. We use the words covenant liberally to describe our overarching statements about who we are, to describe our promises about how we wish to relate with one another, even to capture how we want to behave in committee meetings. We use the word a lot. It's like a persistent perennial that just keeps popping up all over this garden. Now, in this congregation's history, at least its recent history, what may be most familiar is this congregational covenant we spoke this morning, words that carry forward the spirit of the Dedham Church. We recite a slight adaptation of the covenant written by James Villa Blake in 1894 while he was minister to Third Unitarian Church in Evanston, Illinois. And it's spoken very regularly in many UU congregations. When you travel, you may find it spoken in some version almost everywhere. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. It's a noun, it's this thing we recite. It's a document. But as a verb, covenanting, to covenant is the actual practice of trying to keep the promises we made. Practices that are lived and kept and broken and renewed. Practices to stay and tend the garden long enough to understand each other and bring into being a truly beloved community. As a verb, a covenant must be alive and active and open to new interpretations that allow for our constant growth and becoming. We're called into co-creating our covenant ongoingly as our garden grows and expands. I love how Reverend Victoria Safford put it, in a tradition, and I would add in a society, in a tradition so deeply steeped in individualism, covenant becomes a spiritual practice to ask, to what larger love, to what people, principles, values, and dreams shall we be committed? Covenant calls us to live in the plural. And here's the thing about UUs. We have both an incredibly strong desire for personal autonomy. We are individual, self-actualizing plants. And we have an irrepressible hope to live together in peace in an interdependent garden of beauty. These two commitments compete with, or really better yet, they counterbalance each other. They support one another. We are very intent on claiming our freedom to believe as we must. We love being heretical people who can choose. That's foundational to who we are. And yet covenant is the other half of that foundation. Along with individual freedom of choice, we freely covenant with one another. And neither of these commitments is sufficient on its own. Free thought is empty without interfacing with the differences engendered around us by that freedom for others. And free association without acceptance of individuality does not allow for freedom of thought. So our garden's beauty depends on all of our individual expressions. And by creating shared expectations around the behaviors we want to cultivate, we come closer and closer to creating the beloved community. We grow to trust one another. We feel greater compassion for ourselves and each other. The container of covenant makes this possible. It's like what happens in the garden. Well, it doesn't stay there. It influences how we want to be in the garden, and it teaches us to be better gardeners of healthy relationship everywhere. I hope you're beginning to make the connection between covenant and compassion. A covenant is something that can, if practiced faithfully, bring us out of separateness and into deeper, committed connection, which is the place where compassion lives. We create belonging, and we belong to one another, and we experience compassion for one another through this practice of covenant. There is a warning here, though. There always is. Being in covenant does not mean that we will always feel the love. The garden is not always beautiful. We break our promises all the time. And being in covenant means that we hang in there and try to reconcile our differences and correct our mistakes and keep trying. So that's another practice of covenant, to be willing to be vulnerable and imperfect, and to get close enough to know and be known by those who walk in the garden with us. The Garden of Covenant is a place where we will be changed, really inspired by our experiences together, changed, not because change is demanded of us, but because we, as free individuals, enter freely with a desire to become better humans each day, each week, each month, each year. And we share this desire within community with a commitment to live in the plural. I close with the words of my friend Jill Cowie, who said, "The only freedom adequate to human dignity is the freedom to do what love asks of us. And the greatest blessings of life come to us and through us to the world when, with intimate and freely bonded companions, we try together to live with the integrity of faithful love." May we walk together in this growing and evolving garden of covenant, tending our values and our relationships with an insistent compassion. It's in our DNA. May it ever be so.
Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.